Let me help you with that, Mother.
Oh, Amara, thank the spirits you are here. We couldn't manage it alone.
Allow me to assist as well.
The morning sun crept over the horizon, casting a soft golden glow on the dusty village. The air was quiet except for the low hum of distant roosters and the faint rustle of palm leaves swaying in the breeze. In the center of this humble settlement lived Amara, a young woman whose beauty was subtle but undeniable, a quiet elegance born not from jewels or fine clothing, but from the way she carried herself, her eyes reflecting intelligence and longing. Her home, however, told a different story. Cracked walls, a roof patched with old tin sheets, and the faint smell of earth and sweat marked a life of struggle. Amara had grown up understanding what it meant to go without. Her father woke before dawn to labor in the fields, returning home with hands blistered and back aching, yet barely earning enough to feed the family. Her mother, gentle but weary, spent hours sewing and mending clothes that never seemed to last. Each day, Amara saw the weight of poverty pressing down on them, and she carried it in her heart as well. She made herself a silent promise long ago: she would not live this life forever. One day she would escape it, not just for herself but for the family she loved. Despite her resolve, Amara's heart longed for more than comfort and security. She craved love, not the fleeting admiration of wealth, but a connection that made her soul feel seen. Yet, in a world where survival came first, such dreams felt dangerous. She had learned early that love alone could not protect against hunger or hardship. It was during this time that Kofi entered her life. He was a boy from the same village, his hands rough from work, his clothes simple and patched, yet his spirit shone bright in a way few noticed. Kofi had always been kind, quietly loyal, and unexpectedly wise. He treated Amara with a tenderness that felt rare in a world so focused on status and survival. While others dismissed him as just a poor boy, Amara saw something more, something honest and true. Their early moments together were small but meaningful. They would walk along narrow village paths, watching the birds return to their nests at dusk. He would notice the smallest details, the way a flower pushed through the cracked earth, or how a stream reflected the sky's colors. With Kofi, Amara felt a sense of safety, a warmth she had never known. She laughed more freely, breathed more deeply, and allowed herself to imagine a life shaped by love rather than fear. Yet even in these moments, reality lingered. The community often spoke of ambition and marrying well. "You must think about your future," elders warned. "A poor man cannot give you a life free of suffering." Even her own family, loving though they were, reminded her that careful choices mattered more than the heart alone. Each word chipped away at the joy she felt in Kofi's presence, planting seeds of doubt that whispered of a life she might not be able to endure. Amara's inner conflict began to grow, subtle but unrelenting. Her heart reached for Kofi, craving the simplicity and honesty of his love. Her mind, however, measured the cost of such devotion, whispering reminders of her parents' struggles and the nights they spent worrying about empty cupboards. Love, she realized, was fragile. Security was necessary. And ambition, her lifelong promise, was not something she could betray lightly. Despite the tension within her, there was still hope. Hope that one day love and a stable life might coexist. Hope that she could find a way to honor both her heart and her dreams. The sun climbed higher, and Amara stood at the edge of the small field, watching the village awaken. Kofi approached, his usual gentle smile lighting his face. She felt that flicker of joy, the promise of connection, of something real in a world that demanded compromise. But deep down she could not yet know the choice she would make, nor the pain that decision would bring. The first chapter of her life, full of dreams and longing, was about to collide with the weight of ambition, and nothing would ever be the same. The late afternoon sun draped the village in amber light as Amara walked along the riverbank. The water shimmered softly, reflecting clouds that floated lazily across the sky. Her heart was restless, filled with a mixture of anticipation and unease. She had sensed that something important would happen today, though she did not yet know what form it would take. Kofi walked beside her, his steps careful, his hands clasped together nervously. He had always been composed, but today there was a tremor in his voice, a vulnerability that he rarely showed. When they reached a quiet stretch where the river slowed, he stopped and turned to her, eyes searching, earnest. "Amara," he said, voice low but steady, "there is something I need to tell you. I have carried it in my heart for a long time." Amara's chest tightened. She knew the meaning, yet she wished the moment could be suspended, that time could hold its breath, just long enough for her to gather courage. Kofi took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving hers. "I love you," he said, simple and sincere. "I have loved you since we were children. I know I have nothing to offer in wealth or comfort, but I promise you honesty, loyalty, and a life where we face every hardship together. Amara, will you marry me?" The words hung in the air like a delicate thread. Amara's heart fluttered and ached all at once. She felt the warmth of his sincerity, the steady pull of his devotion. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to leap into his arms and trust that love alone could protect her. But then reality pressed in, heavy and insistent. Her mind raced, spinning through memories and warnings she had long tried to ignore. The sleepless nights she had spent watching her parents struggle. The fear that poverty could trap her forever, no matter how honest the heart she loved. The whispers of the villagers, of friends and family, that life demanded security first and love second. She imagined a life with Kofi, simple, honest, filled with small joys and laughter. And then she imagined a life with a man of wealth and influence, someone who could lift her above the struggles she had always known. The contrast was stark, almost unbearable. Each heartbeat felt like a choice she was not ready to make. Amara's fingers trembled, her gaze fixed on the flowing river. The sun reflected on the water, scattering light across her face, but she barely noticed. She was trapped between her heart's desire and her mind's caution, each pulling her in opposite directions. She wanted love, yet feared poverty. She wanted security, yet longed for connection. Kofi waited patiently, his hope evident, yet tempered by the fear that she might reject him. He had laid his heart bare, vulnerable in a way that few ever dared. His trust in her, his belief that love could prevail, made the weight of her decision almost unbearable. Amara closed her eyes, trying to find clarity. She whispered to herself about ambition and responsibility, about the promise she had made to herself so long ago to escape suffering. But even as she reasoned, a small, persistent voice in her chest reminded her of Kofi's unwavering kindness, his quiet strength, the safety she felt when he was near. Every passing second stretched into an eternity. Birds called softly in the distance. The river rippled against the stones. But the world outside had disappeared. There was only the fragile tension between two hearts, one seeking to give everything, the other struggling to balance desire with fear. Finally, Amara opened her eyes. She looked at Kofi, at the boy who had been her companion, her confidant, her silent protector through countless small moments of joy and sorrow. She felt the ache of love tugging at her soul, but it was entangled with the ever-present shadow of doubt. Her lips parted, but no words came yet. In that suspended moment, a seed of regret took root, an unspoken warning that every choice carried a cost. The river flowed on, indifferent. The sun dipped lower, casting longer shadows, and the day seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the decision that would alter both their lives forever. Amara's heart ached with longing and fear. She knew even now that the choice she would make was not just about Kofi, it was about the life she believed she deserved, and the life she feared she might never survive. And as the river whispered past, carrying secrets to the sea, she felt the weight of the moment pressing down. The proposal had arrived, but so had the impossible choice. The golden light of the riverbank had faded into soft evening, but the memory of Kofi's words lingered in the air like a fragile echo. Amara's heart raced, every beat heavy with the weight of the choice she could no longer avoid. Kofi stood before her, hopeful and vulnerable, a quiet strength in his posture, yet a tremor of fear in his eyes. He had trusted her completely, laid bare the most precious part of his soul, and now he waited for her answer. Amara swallowed hard. Her lips trembled as she searched for words that could somehow soften the blow, but there were none. She looked at him, the boy who had been her companion through childhood joys and adolescent dreams, and felt a pang of guilt so sharp it cut through her chest. Her mind screamed, "This is for your future. This is for survival. You must choose wisely." But her heart, the part that had whispered softly in stolen moments along the dusty paths of the village, cried for a life she had almost allowed herself to imagine. I cannot marry you, Kofi," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. The world seemed to pause. The rustle of leaves, the gentle lap of the river, even the distant calls of the village, all faded into silence. Kofi's face remained composed, but Amara saw the flicker of pain that passed through his eyes, swift and deep, like a shadow cutting across sunlight. He did not shout. He did not beg. He simply bowed his head, dignity intact, and let the quiet grief settle around them. Amara turned away, suddenly aware of the gravity of what she had done. The ache in her chest was immediate, heavy, almost suffocating. She tried to justify herself. The life she wanted, the promise she had made to escape suffering, the whispers of the community that wealth mattered more than love. Every excuse felt hollow in the face of Kofi's silent heartbreak. Kofi stepped back, a subtle but profound withdrawal. He did not curse her. He did not express anger. He simply accepted what had been given, his pride and love entwined with an invisible sorrow. It was a pain that Amara could feel seeping into her own soul, but it was too late. The choice was made. The path was set. In the days that followed, whispers spread through the village. Some nodded in approval at Amara's prudence, convinced she had chosen wisely. Others shook their heads in silent judgment, seeing the quiet tragedy of two hearts torn apart by circumstance and ambition. But no words could reach the chasm that had opened between them. The love that had been genuine, tender, and steadfast was gone, replaced by the echo of what might have been. Amara carried an odd mixture of relief and guilt. Relief that she had followed the path she believed would bring security, and guilt that she had wounded a heart so pure and true. Nights became restless, filled with dreams where Kofi's smile haunted her, and the river of their shared moments ran endlessly through her mind. Even as she told herself she had acted wisely, she could not erase the knowledge that she had rejected something rare, something invaluable. In the quiet moments alone, she felt the end of innocence. She had learned that choices carried weight far greater than she could have imagined. That love, no matter how deep, could be sacrificed for ambition, and the consequences would follow, quietly, relentlessly, through every decision thereafter. Kofi, for his part, began to retreat into himself, but never with bitterness. His dignity remained unbroken, his moral compass intact, even as heartbreak shadowed every step. He had loved fully and honestly, and that love, though unreciprocated, would shape him in ways Amara could not yet understand. For Amara, the days ahead would be filled with anticipation for a life of comfort, and yet an emptiness began to take root, a quiet, unspoken ache for the warmth she had walked away from. She had chosen security, but the cost was not just Kofi's love, it was a part of herself she would never fully reclaim. And as the village moved on around them, as the river flowed and the sun rose again, the first chapter of their story closed with a bittersweet truth. Some choices, once made, cannot be undone, and some losses leave marks that no wealth can ever erase. The village streets that once smelled of dust and earth now seemed distant, almost foreign, as Amara entered a new world she had long dreamed of. Tay was nothing like Kofi. He was polished, confident, and surrounded by the trappings of wealth. From the moment she met him, she felt the difference between her old life and the one now within reach. The first time he took her hand, it was warm, sure, and deliberate, a promise of security she had never known, a world untouched by hunger or want. Tay's home was grand, with walls adorned and polished wood, gleaming floors, and windows that opened onto gardens carefully tended, a stark contrast to the cracked walls and patched roof of Amara's childhood home. She marveled at the luxury, allowing herself to breathe for the first time in years without the weight of constant worry pressing on her chest. For the first time, she felt the intoxicating thrill of being seen, valued, and admired. Her courtship with Tay was swift and dazzling. He showered her with gifts, jewelry that sparkled like captured sunlight, dresses that brushed the floor, and invitations to gatherings she had only dreamed of attending. People she had once known in the village now looked at her with awe and admiration. Her family, proud and relieved, beamed at her as though she had stepped into the life they had always wished for her. Every approving glance, every whispered compliment, every polite nod reinforced her belief that she had made the correct choice. Amara allowed herself to be swept away in this new existence. She smiled, laughed, and played the part expected of her, an elegant, accomplished woman stepping into a life of privilege. The village's hardships felt like a distant memory, replaced by a world of sparkling possibilities. On the surface, she had achieved the dream she had nurtured in quiet desperation, a life of security, comfort, and social recognition. But beneath the shine of wealth, a subtle emptiness began to take root. Luxury could not replace warmth, and admiration could not replicate genuine affection. In moments of quiet, when the laughter and music of gatherings faded, Amara felt the absence of something she could not name, the simplicity, honesty, and unshakable loyalty that Kofi had offered so freely. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself that love was not enough, that ambition and survival had to come first. But even in her most confident moments, a quiet ache persisted, tugging at the edges of her heart. Tay, for all his charm, revealed glimpses of impatience and a desire for control that Amara tried to ignore. A slight disdain for imperfection here, a dismissive comment about the less fortunate there. He was proud, meticulous, and utterly focused on status and appearances. Amara brushed these aside, convincing herself that this was normal, that compromises were necessary, that comfort required vigilance. Yet every smile he offered came with a faint shadow of expectation, a reminder that love was transactional, and she was expected to perform her role flawlessly. Her family's pride reinforced her choice. They celebrated her with lavish dinners and approval-laden conversations, never noticing the slight tension in her eyes, the occasional sigh she could not hide, the moments when her mind wandered back to the boy she had left behind. The villagers who once whispered about Kofi now murmured at her elevated position, praising her discernment, her ambition, her courage in choosing wisely. Still, deep within her, a sense of unease lingered, quiet but persistent. In the middle of the night, when the opulence and praise faded, she would catch herself imagining Kofi's humble smile, the warmth of his presence, the ease of love that had never demanded perfection. She told herself it was folly, that the past belonged to the life she had left behind. Yet the pull of memory was insistent, as though fate had not yet finished with him, or with her. Amara's new life was dazzling, her path lined with gold, yet the very things she had sought, security, admiration, and comfort, were slowly revealing their limitations. She had escaped poverty, yes, but in doing so she had traded certainty for emptiness, luxury for authenticity, and social approval for genuine connection. The tension between her desires and her reality had only begun, and though the world around her celebrated her success, her heart quietly questioned the cost. Every lavish dinner, every elegant gown, every compliment from society carried a subtle reminder. Happiness was not measured in wealth alone, and love, once rejected, might not wait quietly in the past. A whisper of doubt settled over her like a shadow, hinting that the next chapter of her life, engagement, wedding, and ultimate reckoning, was already on its way. The golden path she had chosen gleamed brilliantly in the light of achievement, but shadows lingered at the edges, unseen by all but her. And deep in her heart, she knew that while she had gained security, she had also lost something irreplaceable, something that no amount of wealth could ever restore. The village, which had once seemed so small and familiar, now felt like a stage for Amara's new life. Invitations had been sent, celebrations planned, and the engagement announcement was to be made at a grand gathering under bright lanterns and flowing fabrics. Guests arrived from neighboring towns, bringing praise, congratulations, and admiration. Amara stood at the center of it all, radiant in a dress of shimmering silk, pearls tracing her neck like quiet reminders of the life she had fought to attain. On the surface, everything was perfect. Tay smiled beside her, confident and charming, guiding her through each ritual of ceremony and etiquette. Friends and family surrounded her, nodding approval and whispering compliments about her discernment and ambition. Her parents' pride was palpable. They believed their daughter had secured a life they could never imagine, far from the hardships that had haunted their own years. And yet, despite the grandeur, Amara felt a subtle unease, a shadow brushing against the edges of her consciousness. During the toasts and laughter, her mind wandered to Kofi. She remembered his quiet strength, his unwavering loyalty, the ease with which he had understood her in ways that Tay never could. She tried to push the memories aside, telling herself that he belonged to the past, that her choice had been made wisely. But the echoes of that past tugged at her, persistent and insistent. At night, when the celebrations ended and the guests had gone, Amara lay awake in her room, the soft moonlight spilling across the polished floor. She remembered the riverbank, Kofi's earnest eyes, the words of his proposal. Her chest ached with longing she could not name, and guilt settled over her like a heavy cloak. Had she chosen security at the cost of happiness? She turned her face into the pillow, trying to silence the thoughts that refused to be ignored. Preparations for the wedding intensified the pressure. Every detail, from the flowers to the seating arrangements, from the embroidered linens to the gold-plated invitations, was a testament to status and wealth. But with each step, the gulf between external perfection and internal emptiness grew. Amara moved through the tasks mechanically, smiling and nodding, while the quiet ache of regret whispered in the corners of her mind. Even among the people who celebrated her, she felt a subtle isolation. Conversations seemed distant, laughter felt rehearsed, admiration rang hollow. Friends asked about her excitement, but she could only nod and offer polite smiles. Inside she questioned everything. Was this truly happiness, or simply a reflection of approval she had learned to crave? Was love measurable by wealth and attention, or was it something far more elusive, something she had already let slip through her fingers? Dreams began to invade her sleep. Kofi appeared in them as vividly as he had in her memory, his gentle smile, the quiet riverbank where he had asked for her heart. She woke with her chest tight, unable to shake the vivid sense of loss. Each morning she tried to immerse herself in the elegance of her surroundings, yet the memory of simplicity, honesty, and genuine love lingered like a shadow she could not outrun. Even Tay, for all his charm, seemed unable to fill the void. He offered comfort, attention, and social prestige, yet the intimacy she had known with Kofi remained absent. His words were polite, his gestures considerate, but they lacked the quiet understanding that had made her heart feel safe in Kofi's presence. The contrast between transactional affection and heartfelt connection became impossible to ignore. The villagers, meanwhile, continued to celebrate her choices. Their eyes reflected admiration, envy, and approval. They could see only the glittering surface, the wealth and status she had acquired. They could not see the subtle fracture within her, the shadow of doubt that haunted every perfectly arranged meal, every meticulously planned event. Amara's heart was caught between two worlds, the one she had chosen and the one she had left behind. She longed for Kofi, yet feared poverty. She craved comfort, yet could not silence the memory of honest love. The shadow of doubt grew with each passing day, an invisible thread pulling her toward questions she was not yet ready to answer. And so, as the engagement celebrations drew on, the tension built quietly but relentlessly. Every toast, every smile, every nod of approval was tinged with an unspoken warning. Even the most carefully chosen path could not erase the cost of the heart she had abandoned. The golden path, lined with admiration and luxury, carried a shadow she could not escape, a shadow that would follow her through the wedding, through the choices she had yet to make, and through the reckoning that was already moving toward her. After Amara's rejection, Kofi retreated into a quiet solitude, carrying the weight of heartbreak without complaint. The villagers who had once laughed at him now watched with a mix of sympathy and respect, noticing a change in the boy who had loved so purely. Kofi did not seek pity, he did not demand recognition. Instead, he focused on himself, on the small ways he could rebuild a life defined not by loss but by integrity and perseverance. His days began with early mornings in the fields, tending to crops and livestock with diligence that had always been part of him but now carried a new purpose. Every drop of sweat, every aching muscle, was a reminder that life's value was not measured solely by wealth or social status, but by the effort one poured into it. Kofi's hands became rougher, his movements more confident, and his mind sharper. He understood, more than ever, that hardship was not a punishment, it was a teacher. Kofi's moral compass guided him. He resisted bitterness, refusing to curse Amara or the life she had chosen. Instead, he allowed himself to feel the sorrow fully, acknowledging the depth of his love and loss without letting it poison him. He prayed quietly each morning, not for revenge but for clarity, strength, and the patience to let life unfold as it must. Opportunities, small and unexpected, began to appear. A traveling merchant recognized Kofi's honesty and skill, offering him work far beyond the village's borders. He learned new trades, expanded his knowledge, and invested in his character as much as in his future. Kofi grew not only in resourcefulness but in emotional resilience. Every hardship he faced became a lesson in humility, self-discipline, and inner strength. He let go of the hope that Amara might return, but he never forgot her. In quiet moments, he allowed himself the memory of her smile, the light in her eyes, the laughter that once carried him through lonely days. Rather than clinging to the past, he carried it as a reminder of what love could be, pure, honest, and untainted by convenience or fear. Kofi's transformation did not go unnoticed. Friends and neighbors began to see a man who had matured through heartbreak, whose strength was quiet but undeniable. They watched as he gained respect in the wider world, not through boasting or force, but through consistent character and steadfast dedication. His reputation for honesty and kindness spread, earning him trust in ways that money alone could never buy. Yet Kofi remained humble. He did not flaunt his growing success, and he did not seek the attention he had once been denied. He lived quietly, fully aware that life had a rhythm beyond ambition or revenge. Each day was a step, each decision a brick in the foundation of a man who had suffered, learned, and grown. Subtle hints suggested that fate was not finished with him. He encountered people who would later play a pivotal role in his life, connections that seemed coincidental but carried the weight of destiny. And though he never spoke of Amara, he felt that the threads of their story were far from severed. Somewhere in the world, their paths might cross again, and when they did, he wanted to meet her not as the heartbroken boy she had rejected, but as a man of strength, dignity, and moral clarity. Kofi's days were also filled with quiet reflection. He considered the nature of love, the cost of choices, and the way life could change in the blink of an eye. He understood that bitterness was easy, but it led nowhere. Patience, resilience, and faith were the true paths to fulfillment. In this understanding, he found a peace he had never known as a young man in the village, a serenity born not of circumstance but of character. Though he had lost Amara, he had gained something perhaps even more profound, the realization that life's trials could refine rather than destroy, that love, though rejected, could teach endurance, and that the world had a way of balancing truth and justice in its own time. He carried no malice, only hope, a quiet, unassuming belief that the choices made with integrity would eventually be rewarded. And as he walked along the paths of the village, now with a quiet confidence and steady gaze, there was a sense that the next chapter of their intertwined lives was approaching. Though he did not know the hour or the place, Kofi felt it in the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Life was far from over, and what had begun in heartbreak might yet find its resolution. In this silent rebirth, Kofi became not just a man who had survived love and loss, but one who had grown into the embodiment of integrity, patience, and quiet power. His journey had only just begun, and the world was beginning to notice that the poor boy who had been dismissed and underestimated was now a man who could not be ignored. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of day that seemed made for celebration. White petals littered the streets, fluttering like fragile snow in the gentle breeze. Guests had arrived from near and far, filling the grand hall with laughter, chatter, and the polished shimmer of gold and silk. Amara moved through the preparations like a queen in a carefully constructed kingdom, every gesture, every smile, perfectly rehearsed. She wore a gown of delicate lace that caught the light with every step, pearls tracing the line of her neck, her hair pinned high with jewels that glinted like captured stars. The hall was a spectacle of wealth and taste, towering floral arrangements, crystal chandeliers reflecting soft candlelight, tables laden with delicacies, and musicians tuning instruments for the ceremony to come. Every detail had been meticulously planned, each symbol reinforcing status, power, and social admiration. To the world, this day was a triumph, the realization of ambition and desire perfectly entwined. Yet beneath the glittering surface, Amara felt a gnawing unease. Her heart beat rapidly, not with excitement, but with a tension she could not shake. Every laugh felt too loud, every compliment too pointed, every gaze from the crowd a reminder that the world was watching, expecting perfection. She smiled for them, moved gracefully for them, and yet inside she trembled. Her thoughts wandered, as they often did in quiet moments, to Kofi. The memory of his humble smile, the gentle steadiness of his hands, the quiet warmth of his presence, invaded her mind like a shadow she could not dispel. She told herself it was foolish. He was a part of the past, a life she had left behind, but the shadow lingered, insistent, pulling at the corners of her consciousness. Tay moved beside her, confident and composed. His charm dazzled the guests, his smile reassuring to all who looked upon him. To him, the ceremony was perfect, flawless, a testament to success and refinement. And yet, Amara noticed the subtle impatience in his gestures, the small hints of disapproval when things did not proceed exactly as he had envisioned. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself that these were minor imperfections easily ignored. But each fleeting shadow in his demeanor mirrored the quiet unease in her heart. The guests continued to arrive, a sea of polished faces and whispered admiration. Some eyes were filled with envy, others with genuine joy, and a few carried the silent curiosity of those who sensed tension beneath the beauty. Amara moved among them, nodding, smiling, performing the role she had chosen, and yet feeling increasingly isolated. Despite the crowd, despite the celebration, she was alone with her thoughts, and the weight of her choices pressed down more heavily than ever. As the ceremony approached, her anxiety intensified. She stood near the altar, adjusting the folds of her gown, feeling the smooth silk brush her skin, trying to focus on the steps she had to take. Every moment of silence was deafening, every glance in the mirror reflecting not only her beauty but the uncertainty she carried inside. She wondered, fleetingly and with a pang of guilt, if Kofi could have understood this moment in a way that Tay never would. The music began to play softly, signaling the start of the procession. Guests turned their attention toward the aisle, eyes bright with expectation. Amara took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and stepped forward. Every step seemed measured, deliberate, yet her mind was a whirlwind. Her chest tightened with the contrast between the grandeur surrounding her and the quiet longing inside. Each step down the aisle was a reminder. She had chosen wealth, status, and security over the love she had once held. The applause, the whispered praise, the admiring glances, all felt like echoes in a cavernous space where her heart had been left behind. And yet she could not stop. The path was set, the day unfolding, the world expecting her to shine. A subtle tension hung in the air, unseen but palpable. Every gesture of celebration, every symbol of success, carried an undercurrent of suspense. Something unspoken lingered at the edges of the room, a quiet awareness that fate has a way of moving unseen. And deep in her chest, Amara felt the pull of inevitability, a sense that this day, perfect in appearance, might hold surprises she could not yet imagine. The wedding day had arrived, filled with brilliance, opulence, and social admiration. Yet behind the veil of silk and lace, behind the glittering gold and smiling faces, Amara's heart whispered the truth she could not escape. Wealth could not fill the spaces left by love, and the past had not yet finished with her. As the music swelled and guests leaned forward in anticipation, the stage was set for the moment that would change everything. Every eye in the hall, every polished smile, every shining decoration bore witness to a story about to unfold. A story of choice, regret, and the quiet power of love that refuses to be ignored. The hall glittered with light, laughter, and the soft hum of music as Amara moved down the aisle, her heart a complicated rhythm of anticipation and unease. Guests leaned forward, eyes bright with expectation, while Tay's confident smile radiated pride and assurance. On the surface, everything was perfect, the culmination of ambition, effort, and status. Every detail had been meticulously arranged, every gaze carefully guided toward admiration. And then, in the midst of the carefully choreographed brilliance, the doors at the far end of the hall swung open. A hush swept through the room, a ripple that traveled like an electric current across every polished face. And there, standing quietly yet with a presence that could not be ignored, was Kofi. He had changed. Time, hardship, and resilience had carved him into a man of quiet strength and dignity. His clothes were simple but neat, his posture calm and assured. There was no bitterness in his eyes, only a steady, unwavering clarity that seemed to illuminate the space around him. The crowd, accustomed to admiration and wealth, instinctively leaned back, sensing something extraordinary in his quiet composure. Amara froze. The pearls at her neck suddenly felt heavy, her silk gown constrictive. Her heart pounded in her chest, a chaotic drumbeat that drowned out the music. She could hardly believe her eyes. Kofi, the boy she had once rejected, the humble suitor she had dismissed in pursuit of security, was here, and the presence of his quiet dignity made her world feel suddenly fragile, unreal, and insufficient. Tay noticed him first, and his smile faltered for the briefest moment, replaced by the flicker of unease. Kofi did not approach aggressively, did not speak, did not demand recognition. He merely stood at the doorway, calm, composed, and impossibly present. It was as though the universe itself had paused to make the moment undeniable. Here was a truth Amara could no longer ignore. Memories flooded her mind. The riverbank, the soft conversations, the simple joy of being understood. Kofi's voice, gentle and unwavering, echoing in the quiet corners of her memory. Every regret she had tucked away came rushing forward, sharp and relentless. And with it, the realization that the life she had chosen, glittering, admired, and secure, was hollow in ways she had never allowed herself to admit. The guests murmured, a wave of curiosity and surprise spreading through the hall. Some leaned forward to see the man who had captured Amara's heart in ways wealth never could. Others whispered about destiny, coincidence, and the strange twists of life. The air itself seemed to tremble with the weight of the unspoken drama unfolding before them. Tay stepped closer to Amara, his hand reaching for hers, but his confidence wavered. The polished veneer of control could not mask the subtle realization that he was facing something unanticipated, something he could not command. The power of wealth, status, and meticulous planning faltered in the face of Kofi's presence, and for the first time he felt the fragility of appearances. Amara's chest tightened. Tears blurred her vision as she took in the man she had loved and lost. The reality was undeniable. Kofi had endured, had grown, had thrived despite rejection, while she had pursued security and found only the fragile illusion of fulfillment. Her heart ached with longing and remorse, and the applause and admiration around her sounded distant, hollow, and meaningless. Kofi's gaze met hers. There was no accusation, no demand, only a quiet understanding that cut deeper than any words could. The strength in his eyes, the clarity of his presence, and the moral integrity he carried illuminated the truth she had tried to bury. Love that is genuine, patient, and unwavering cannot be replaced by gold or status. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The music faltered, guests held their breath, and even the light in the hall felt altered, as if acknowledging the reckoning that had arrived. Amara's carefully constructed world of wealth and social approval collapsed silently around her, leaving only the weight of her choices and the unyielding presence of the man she had rejected. And in that moment, the truth became undeniable. Tay's charm, wealth, and social validation could not fill the void left by a love she had abandoned. The facade of perfection, the gilded halls, the pearls and silk, all were meaningless compared to the moral strength, humility, and unwavering devotion embodied by Kofi. The crowd sensed the shift, though they did not understand its full magnitude. Murmurs spread like wine through the room. Some turned their eyes to Amara with sympathy, others with quiet astonishment. The illusion of wealth and control was pierced, revealing the fragile reality that lay beneath. Amara felt her knees weaken. Pride, illusion, and ambition, all the forces that had guided her life, crumbled in the presence of the man who had loved her fully, unconditionally, and silently. The wedding day, meant to cement status and social triumph, had transformed into a reckoning, a confrontation with truth, and a revelation that the heart cannot be coerced, bought, or ignored. In that suspended, excruciating moment, Amara realized the profound cost of her choices. She had pursued security at the expense of love, status over sincerity, and now the consequences were undeniable. Kofi's quiet rebirth, his moral and emotional strength, had returned not in anger, not in vengeance, but as a mirror reflecting everything she had left behind. The hall, once filled with laughter and celebration, now hummed with a tense, almost electric silence. Guests whispered among themselves, glancing from Kofi to Amara, sensing the shift in power, emotion, and truth. The opulence, the polished gowns, and the sparkling decorations no longer seemed impressive. They felt fragile, hollow, and inconsequential. The world Amara had so carefully built with Tay's wealth had been quietly, irrevocably shaken. Amara stood frozen, the weight of realization pressing down like a stone on her chest. Pride, vanity, and ambition crumbled as she understood the full magnitude of her choices. The man she had dismissed, the poor suitor she had once rejected out of fear and pragmatism, had returned transformed. Stronger, dignified, and morally steadfast, Kofi was a living testament to the life she had forsaken. Her mind raced. She remembered every moment, every whisper, every thought that had led her to choose security over love. The words she had spoken to reject him replayed endlessly, echoing with increasing sharpness. She had believed that wealth and status would shield her from hardship and disappointment, but now she saw that they could not protect her from regret, remorse, or the emptiness that had quietly grown inside her. Tay's composure faltered. Though he maintained a polite exterior, the cracks were visible, subtle gestures, tight jaw, and a fleeting glance that revealed unease. He had built his image on control, social standing, and wealth, yet here stood a man untouched by these measures, commanding attention without effort or pretense. Tay's charm could not compete with Kofi's integrity, and he sensed, perhaps for the first time, the fragility of appearances. The community reacted in a mixture of awe, judgment, and reflection. Those who had praised Amara's choice now paused, considering the cost of prioritizing wealth over heart. Some murmured about fate, destiny, and moral balance, realizing that true character could not be hidden behind riches or status. The whispers spread quickly, a subtle reminder that the values of the world were not always aligned with the desires of society. Amara's own remorse was overwhelming. Her cheeks burned with shame, her chest tightened with the weight of sorrow. She had sought security, social approval, and comfort, and yet none of it could fill the void left by a genuine, unwavering love. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, unbidden and unstoppable as she confronted the truth. The life she had chosen was hollow, and the heart she had abandoned could not be reclaimed with wealth or apology alone. Kofi, for his part, moved with quiet dignity. He did not scold her, did not demand an explanation, and did not seek revenge. His silence was a mirror, reflecting the depth of her loss and the consequences of her choices. He had grown not through bitterness but through moral resilience, patience, and self-respect. His presence alone was a lesson she could not ignore. True strength lies in character, and genuine love cannot be forced or bought. Amara's parents watched in stunned silence. Their pride and joy had turned to quiet reflection, as they realized that their daughter's pursuit of security had come at an emotional cost too great to ignore. They had hoped to protect her from suffering, but the lesson they now saw was far more profound. Happiness, integrity, and love were not always measured in material wealth. Tay's attempt to maintain control failed in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. His authority in the room waned, his confidence shaken, as he realized that appearances and wealth could not dictate matters of the heart. The polished illusion he had relied on for so long was unsteady, fragile, and insufficient. Amara sank to her seat for a moment, tears freely flowing as she absorbed the weight of the moment. Guilt, sorrow, and self-reproach mingled with the faintest spark of understanding. She had learned, painfully and irrevocably, that her choices carried consequences that could not be undone, and that no measure of social success could replace the loss of something authentic and irreplaceable. The guests watched silently, many with sympathetic glances, others with quiet contemplation. The hall had transformed from a stage of celebration into a chamber of moral reckoning. Each person present understood, in some measure, that wealth and status were fragile, fleeting, and ultimately meaningless without the foundation of integrity, sincerity, and heartfelt connection. And as Kofi stood, dignified and unwavering, and Amara faced the truth of her actions, a profound silence filled the room. The wedding, meant to solidify status and admiration, had become a mirror reflecting the consequences of choice, the fragility of appearances, and the enduring power of love and character. In this reckoning, Amara felt the deepest sorrow she had ever known, but also a glimmer of clarity. She understood that mistakes, while irreversible, could teach wisdom, humility, and moral insight. The world might continue to admire wealth, but she now knew that character and love were the true measures of a life well lived. The days after the broken wedding passed slowly, as if time itself needed space to recover. The village returned to its routines, but something had changed. Conversations were softer. Laughter was careful. The story of what had happened did not fade. It settled, resting in people's minds like a lesson too important to forget. Amara withdrew from the noise of society. The dresses, the jewelry, the plans she had once cherished now felt meaningless. She spent long hours alone, replaying every choice she had made, every fear that had guided her steps. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to sit with discomfort rather than run from it. She understood now that her deepest mistake was not rejecting Kofi, it was believing that love without wealth was a weakness. Poverty had once terrified her because she had seen what it did to her parents. The exhaustion, the silent sacrifices, the constant worry. She had sworn never to live that life. But in her determination to escape suffering, she had also escaped sincerity. She had traded emotional safety for financial comfort, believing one could replace the other. Now she knew better. Kofi, meanwhile, returned to his path without drama or triumph. He did not speak of the wedding. He did not allow himself to become a symbol of revenge or victory. Instead, he continued living with the same quiet discipline that had carried him through loss. His life was fuller now, not because of recognition but because he was at peace with who he had become. When Amara finally found the courage to face him, it was not with expectations. She did not ask for forgiveness as a right, nor did she seek to reclaim what she had lost. She came with humility, aware that some doors once closed do not reopen. She carried no pride, only honesty and regret. Kofi listened. He did not interrupt her pain or minimize it. In his silence was a kindness deeper than words. He had forgiven her long before she asked, not because the wound was small, but because he refused to let it define him. Yet forgiveness did not mean restoration. Love, once broken by fear and choice, could not simply return to its original shape. Amara accepted this truth with tears but also with grace. She realized that redemption did not always mean getting back what was lost. Sometimes, it meant becoming someone wiser because of it. She began to rebuild her life, not around status or appearances, but around purpose and compassion. She supported her family, served her community, and learned to value people for who they were, not what they had. The village too learned. Parents spoke differently to their daughters. Young men were judged less by their pockets and more by their principles. The story of Amara and Kofi became a quiet reminder that life has a way of correcting shallow values, sometimes gently, sometimes painfully. As seasons changed, Both Amara and Kofi found new forms of happiness. Not perfect, not effortless, but honest. They were no longer driven by fear or ambition alone. They were guided by understanding. In the end, there was no dramatic reunion, no public declaration of love. There was something quieter and far more powerful: growth. Two people shaped by loss, choosing to move forward with clarity instead of regret. And so the story closed not with a wedding but with wisdom. Because true wealth was never in gold or grand ceremonies. It lived in character, in courage, in the choices made when no one was watching. And that was the lesson the village and Amara would never forget.